So what's up, guys? So the latest chapter of Dragon Ball Super, the superhero retelling, has just dropped. Gamma 1 and 2 actually have a team fight against Gohan and Piccolo, which I thought was really cool because that's something we didn't get to see in the film. I really do think that seeing Gamma 1 and 2 actually work together against Gohan and Piccolo would have been preferable in my opinion. But this is just a video breaking down some of the really cool stuff, the really cool symbolism that's hidden throughout this manga chapter, because if you go back and read it after you've watched this video, I guarantee you will enjoy the chapter more, because there's a lot of really subtle symbolism and cool stuff that happens in this chapter, and as well as the Dragon Ball Super superhero film. So the first thing I want to call attention to is this Viz mistranslation, which gets on my nerves, and that is after Gohan gets his ultimate form from the last chapter, instead of like in the original translation where Piccolo says that Gohan has awakened, Piccolo says, "Look, great. Looks like he's back in action." And I cannot stand this change, because the word awakening has major context and implications for Gohan's character. It always has, ever since he was a child. Akira Toriyama even specified that the beast form is playing on the awakenings that Gohan would experience as a child. And so this associates the ultimate state with the awakenings that Gohan had as a child outside of Super Saiyan, and that's the reason that I do not like this change in the translation at all. They need to use the term awakening, because not only does it have major context for Gohan's character, but the term awakening is used because it's in reference to the term Buddha, which means awakened, and it's all there for the sake of symbolism. So one really cool thing that I think should be pointed out here is the fact that Piccolo and Gohan, this entire interaction between Gamma 1 and 2 and Gohan and Piccolo, is a continuation of the teachings of Piccolo himself. And this entire film, in fact, has been shaped to essentially have Gohan reach the final conclusion of his training with Piccolo. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you pay attention, Piccolo is essentially pulling a Goku from the Cell Saga by using Pan to trigger Gohan into awakening his power. And he's also telling Gohan, as they're facing Gamma 1 and 2, that we need to take them out as quickly and efficiently as possible. Now, why is this important? Because Gohan has always had a conscious sense of justice that his father does not. And it's always caused issues for him in terms of getting the job done. Piccolo talks about this blatantly in the Dragon Ball Super anime prior to the Tournament of Power. He tells Gohan that his sense of justice is so strong that it actually prevents him from being efficient in battle. And so, when you consider that Gohan, as the Great Saiyaman, and Gamma 1 and 2 are all based on Sentai-based material, and that they both represent this theme of a blind sense of justice, it really feels like Gohan, in combination with Piccolo, are facing a reflection of Gohan's past ideas and who he has been in the past. Whenever, for example, in the Cell Saga, his anger caused him to feel justified in his actions, and so he was blind to the reality of the situation he was in. And so Gamma 1 and 2 are a great example of the concept that Gohan suffered from in the Cell Saga, and this entire film is being treated as Gohan reflecting on his past mistakes and working through them through not only Gamma 1 and 2, but also Cell Max. And the main point of Piccolo's teachings since the very beginning has been all about doing what you need to in order to survive. Not necessarily doing things for a sense of justice. That's not Piccolo's style. You are only supposed to use violence and things of that nature because you should have the will or the necessity to survive in mind when you use this violence. That was the reason that Piccolo suggested that Gohan become a warrior in the Dragon Ball Super anime whenever he takes on his ultimate state, because otherwise he either gets cocky or he feels too justified in his actions, and that causes him to mess up. So this represents some major development for Gohan as a character. This entire fight is really cool and set up in a really cool way in that way, because again, Piccolo is the reason that Gohan has been taught these concepts, and so Piccolo and Gohan working together to fight Gamma 1 and 2 is sort of symbolic of Piccolo helping Gohan work through his blind sense of justice that has plagued him in the past, and he's alleviating it with the teachings of the Demon Clan. And as I've talked about in previous videos, demons in Chinese mythology represent beings who refuse to be reincarnated and put their survival over all things. So the idea that Gohan is using that to alleviate his strong sense of justice, and that Piccolo and Gohan are working through those issues together by facing Gamma 1 and 2 is just a really cool idea, and I think it's underappreciated conceptually. I think that it's something that people kind of look over. I mean, that's the entire reason that Gohan and Piccolo are working together. That's the entire reason that they're both sporting the gi of the Demon Clan, is because they are both representations of a philosophy that, in the case of Dragon Ball, Gohan and Piccolo's philosophy in this case rings through as the proper one in terms of narrative. And that brings me to Piccolo. Now, Orange Piccolo is revealed in this chapter, and I just want to take a second to just give you some context as to the buildup of Orange Piccolo and just how cool Orange Piccolo actually is. So, before I get started on Super, I want to take a look back at the original Dragon Ball and look at the original narrative purpose of the Dragon Balls themselves. So the Dragon Balls in the original Dragon Ball were a replacement for the Buddha Sutras from Journey to the West as the end goal of a journey towards enlightenment. And the Dragon Balls themselves are based on the Dragon Jewels from Chinese mythology, which are also treated as the final product, the final prize in the journey towards enlightenment. That was the entire reason that Toriyama replaced the sutras with the Dragon Balls, is because the Dragon Balls themselves are a reference to an object that represents the end goal of enlightenment itself. Now, I also want you to consider the symbolism behind Shenlong himself. The type of dragon that Shenlong is has deep symbolism behind him. In one iteration, in the Taoist iteration of these Chinese dragons, they used to fawn over and chase the moon because the moon had control over their environment, and so they felt that if they possessed the moon, they could use it to their advantage to control and manipulate their environment for their survival. And this is a metaphor for the teachings of Taoism and your ability to use enlightenment itself to create the best possible scenario for you in your lifetime. So that's one really cool aspect of the type of dragon that Shenlong is based on. But the other legend surrounding these dragons is that the dragons themselves would chase what's known as a dragon jewel, which is normally shown as a jewel that has flames shooting out of it because it's associated with the sun, because the sun is associated with Buddhism. And so these dragons chasing these jewels is a metaphor for the journey towards enlightenment and the journey towards becoming a Buddha, because becoming a Buddha would allow you to manifest anything you desire due to the fact that what you desire is not inherently selfish. It's a not inherently selfish thing. If you were to become a Buddha, your desires at that point would manifest themselves because your desires themselves are not inherently selfish. And so it's a metaphor for that idea. So at the very beginning of Dragon Ball Super Hero, Piccolo mentions that he's off balance and he's using meditation to try and maintain his balance. He also criticizes Bulma for using the Dragon Ball selfishly, which I also think is kind of underappreciated considering that Piccolo is the reincarnation of King Piccolo, the Demon King, who actually obliterated Shenlong last time they met each other. And then, of course, King Piccolo was defeated by Goku, the person who would fit the standard of the Dragon Balls, which I'm going to get into here in just a few minutes. King Piccolo himself is demon-themed due to the fact that Sun Wukong is a character who went from a demon to a Buddha as his character progression. And as I established in my last video, the first step towards enlightenment is ego death, and Piccolo actually makes sure to tell Gamma 2 that he is no longer King Piccolo in this chapter, which is very clearly referencing the fact that Piccolo has completely changed as a person. He has been reborn. And due to the fact that ego death is considered a pseudo-reincarnation, and that the themes of King Piccolo's character are based around him being reincarnated after being a demon, I think it's pretty clear where all this is going and where all the symbolism is pointing here. And the wish that he does make, he makes in order to protect the Earth. And that is all very, very, very important within context. Let's talk about the Ajisa tree for a second. So the Ajisa tree is essentially a symbol of Namekian pride. It's a symbol of the pride of the Namekian people. And Dende actually tells the legend of these trees in the original manga, and essentially the point and the purpose of these trees was to use them to essentially create the best possible scenario for the Namekian planet in the future without relying on the Dragon Balls, because they had learned their lesson previously by using the Dragon Balls for selfish wishes, and so they used the Ajisa trees to prevent themselves from creating doom for themselves through using the Dragon Balls in order to survive as a species within the context of selfishness. That suggests that they've had a bad experience with the Dragon Balls in the past, and that they use these trees to maintain the well-being of their planet. Now, this explains perfectly why they have a test amongst the Namekian people to test who is worthy of using the Dragon Balls. This is something that Frieza speaks up on Namek. Essentially, on Namek, there are 7 trials that you must go through until you finally reach the Elder Namek, who will unlock your potential in a dangerous life-or-death scenario, so that way you can survive whatever issue the Namekians are dealing with, and then use the Dragon Balls selflessly in order to restore planet Namek. The entire purpose of this ritual that the Namekians have for their people is to make sure that they do not have a selfish user for their Dragon Balls. Nail was being groomed to be this great warrior that they would use in times of great suffering, and he merged with Piccolo. That's not a coincidence here. Goku was the first ever example of this concept. Goku was a boy who was raised on Earth by his grandfather Gohan, who essentially ingrained him with the nature in order for him to use the Dragon Balls correctly within the context of the Namekian laws. And he's the one who shows up to save Planet Namek due to the fact that he was raised on Earth and became the type of person that the Namekians would allow use the Dragon Balls had they go through the trials that the Namekians require for whoever's going to use them. That's who Goku was. He was that guy. He was the guy who would have fit the standard of the Namekians. Gohan also fit this standard as established in the series, and so did Krillin. And the entire point of that standard is to make sure that these users of the Dragon Balls have pure intentions. Nell even asks if Gohan has pure intentions whenever the Elder Namek reads his mind in the original anime. So why is all this important? Because the Orange Piccolo form is essentially Piccolo finding his own personal enlightenment. It's him finding his own personal balance, and it's also him using the Dragon Balls correctly within the context of the ritual of the Namekian people. And that is what is so cool about it. Piccolo is subconsciously following in the footsteps of his people thanks to Goku's influence and becoming the type of Namekian that they would allow to use the Dragon Balls in order to save the planet and help and ensure its survival. And the reason this is so ridiculously cool is because it's not only a reflection of Goku's effect on Piccolo, it's also a reflection of Gohan's effect on Piccolo, because Gohan is the reason that Piccolo has so much empathy in the modern day. And so Orange Piccolo is a reflection of the Buddhist themes that Gohan represents in the series, having this effect on Piccolo and causing him to evolve and change into the most advanced version of himself. And another really cool thing to consider is that the Namekian culture itself, due to the fact that they are the creators of the Dragon Balls, it's very obvious that Akira Toriyama is referencing the creators and users of the Dragon Jewels or the Shintamani Stones, which were essentially Buddhist monks that were broken down into two different types of monks: martial monks, and then the monks who would practice more of a pacifistic view of things, and they wouldn't use martial arts. They would essentially just try to use the Shintamani Stones or the Dragon Jewels to purify and help villages that they come into contact with, much like how the Dragon Balls have been scattered throughout different planets, and if used correctly can create the best possible scenario for those planets. It's very clear that Akira Toriyama did his homework whenever he was crafting the Namekians as a whole and what they actually are. And when you consider all of the previous context surrounding Piccolo, the fact that he used to be the Demon King Piccolo, much like Sun Wukong used to be a demon, and he has found his personal enlightenment, the Namekians and Namekian culture itself and the Dragon Balls are all centered around this Buddhist idea of the Dragon Jewels or the Shintamani Stones being used to create hope for the future and benefit mankind and lead them all towards enlightenment. No wonder Toriyama wanted to make Orange Piccolo so bad. No wonder he wanted to make a Piccolo film, because he was obviously very passionate about what he did with Piccolo here. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.